A very good morning to all my students. Yes, on Friday we had discussed about brain death part 1, where I had told about what is the concept of brain death. I will just recap today again for 5 minutes, and what were the criteria for diagnosing brain death. Today we would discuss what are the clinical implications of brain death under the following objectives. That is, what are the regulations which govern determination of brain death, the evaluation team in detail, what are the responsibilities of the physician as diagnosing and declaring this news to the relatives, why there is a need for declaration of brain death in those set of patients, after declaration of brain death, how to manage those organ donors, and then what is the clinical implications of these organ donors. So just to recap that, previously till 1960, cessation of cardiopulmonary functions was taken as the death of the patient. But with the refinement of PCR techniques and with the development of ICU and mechanical ventilators, we could support these patients for their cardiopulmonary functions even in the absence of brain function. Hence, there was an evolution of the concept of brainstem death, or recently even told as death by neurologic criteria. So there was a need to redefine all the definitions of death. So as per the World Brain Death Project, I have taken up this definition that brain death or death by neurologic criteria is defined as the complete and permanent loss of brain function as defined by an unresponsive coma with the loss of capacity for consciousness, absence of brainstem reflexes, and also absence of ability to breathe independently. So absence of spontaneous breathing is a very important criteria for brain death. These are the differential diagnoses which you should always remember before documenting brain death, that mainly cases of drug intoxication due to alcohol or tricyclic antidepressants, lidocaine, especially neuromuscular blockade agents which cause paralysis or prolonged paralysis, anticholinergic barbiturate, organophosphoric compounds. So all these can mimic as brain death. Then fulminant Guillain-Barré syndrome, cases of hypothermia, especially when the temperature falls less than 32 degrees Celsius. Cases of high cervical spine injury, which is associated with especially phrenic nerve, which supplies diaphragm, where there could be arrest of spontaneous respiration. So in those patients, you have to be very, very careful not to get confused whether the patient is brain death or not, especially in patients with high cervical spine injury. These patients can be supported with ventilators. In cases of encephalopathy associated with hepatic failure, uremia, or hyperosmolar coma, encephalitis, locked-in syndrome due to damage in corns, and shock hypotension. So let us see what are the laws or the regulations which govern death in India. So in India, death is a part of 3 different rules. So first is the Indian Penal Code, or IPC 1862. So in the section 46 of IPC, death is defined as death of a human being unless contrary appears from the context. So this is as per IPC. Now, the second law is as per the Registrations of Birth and Death Act, that is RBDA Act 1969. So in section 2B of RBDA, death is the permanent disappearance of all evidence of life at any time after live birth has taken place. Means once the person is born, so if there is disappearance of evidence of life, then the person is considered as dead as per RBDA Act. Now, third law, which came in 1994, the most important law, that is the Transplantation of Human Organ Act, that is THO 1994. So in that section 2, it describes death is the permanent disappearance of all evidence of life by reason of brainstem death or in a cardiopulmonary sense at any time after live birth has taken. So it has taken the component of registration of Birth and Death Act, and in that it has added brainstem death. That is what is Transplantation of Human Organ Act. So we have to remember all these three laws. So depending on the situation, we can take any of them and declare the patient as medico legally dead. So in India, the reference is given by Tanvade et al. India follows United Kingdom concept of brainstem death and Transplantation of Human Organ Act 1994, which legalizes the brainstem death. So we have to remember this. We follow the concept of brainstem death. But as per recent recommendation, because there are other countries which have different rules. So World Brain Death Project, it has taken a step ahead to get a uniform concept of declaring death. So in India and UK, it is a concept of brainstem death, whereas US follows the concept of whole brain death. So as per the recommendation of WBDP, it recommends that we should abandon these terms and adhere to determination of death by neurological criteria, that is, determining the brainstem reflexes, then absence of eye response and motor response. So all these should be taken primarily for determining brain death in those patients and remove these inconsistencies in practice. So the evaluation team. If you remember, there is a team of board of medical experts which is defined as per the regulations in Transplantation of Human Organ Act 1994. So it says that we need 4 members which are as follows. That is, medical administrator or superintendent who is in charge of the hospital. We need an authorized specialist. Also, we need an authorized neurologist and a neurosurgeon who would assess the patient for death by neurological criteria, and it also involves a doctor who is treating the patient. So these 4 people have to certify brainstem death. And as per amendments in 2011, if there is absence of approved neurosurgeon or neurologist, we can take help of surgeon or physician or anesthetist or intensivist. So let us see what are the qualifications of the physician who for the determination of brain death. First thing, in India, all practitioners who have completed training and licensed to practice medicine, that is, are registered medical practitioners, allopathy. So they can determine brain death. After this, they should also have experience in management of devastating brain injuries. So along with their registration, they should also have experience as well as regular they should be trained as well as periodically certified in determining brain death and in counseling at end of life care. So all these 3 criteria should be fulfilled by the physician who is involved in determination of brain death. Then number of examinations, like how many times should we perform examination to say that the person is brain dead. Now, a single examination with positive apnea test is minimum standard for determining brain death. Now, in case if apnea test is inconclusive, then we have to perform second evaluation. So, if 2 evaluations are performed, both the examinations have to be performed by 2 separate examiners, and only 1 positive apnea test has to be performed in that patient who is adult. So, if single examination with positive apnea test is sufficient, In case of inconclusive apnea test, we have to go for second evaluation, which has to be performed by a separate examiner. In case of pediatric and neonatal brainstem death. Now, this is a very special scenario because the previous criteria are eligible for the adults who are aged more than or equal to 18 years. If the person's age is less than 18 years, then the criteria changes. Now, again here, the minimum standard remains same as that of adult. But we have to keep in mind that the hemodynamic parameters, minimum hemodynamic parameters are different as per different age groups. So you have to apply those age appropriate prerequisites. And remember, brain death can be determined in a newborn who is born more than or equal to 36 weeks, means who has achieved maturity. In preterm infants less than 36 weeks, brain death cannot be diagnosed. Now, why we need a separate this thing? Now, in these pediatric patients, we have to perform compulsory 2 examinations, including apnea test. In adult, one is possible, one can be taken into consideration, but in case of pediatrics and neonates, we have to perform 2 examinations, which include apnea test. Now, a minimum of 24 hours difference is required between 2 examinations. Okay, so this is one thing you have to remember. Now, prior to initial testing, following asphyxia, resuscitation, or rewarming. So, in case you suspect the child is dead, you have to wait for minimum 24 hours. So, the critical criteria for determining brain death in infants include suckling and rooting reflex. And if necessary, ancillary tests are usually recommended, and we can perform only EEG and radionuclide cerebral blood flow. Now, what is the responsibility of the physician determining brain death? The first and most important thing is notification of next of kin. Next of kin means the immediate family members. Inter-observational period. This is a very, very important thing. We have to repeat clinical assessment of brainstem reflexes, which we had seen last time, and also a group of ancillary tests if they are indicated. Clinical assessment with 1 apnea test is sufficient. If required, only then we have to take ancillary tests. Now, notifying next of kin. Usually it is very hard for the relatives to believe that their family member is no more, in spite of the fact that the patient's heart is still beating. Now, here we have to counsel the relatives that withdrawing of the ventilation is not going to kill the patient. Here, the patient is already dead. So, we are withdrawing ventilation or the mechanical support from the person who is already dead. So, this is very important thing which we have to explain and counsel the relatives. Continuing of ventilation is indicated only for survival of individual organs. So if you think that that brain dead patient can be a potential organ donor, only then we have to continue ventilation. Now, what is the inter-observational period? After the first clinical examination, a definite period of observation is recommended. In adults, 6-hour observation period is sufficient. Means you have performed the first assessment, then you wait for 6 hours, perform the second assessment, and then you certify brain death. In case of pediatrics and neonates, the scenario changes. Now, the children are more resilient than adults. So, more than 6 hours between assessment is advocated. Now, resilient means children are more capable of sustaining or sustaining the damage, means whatever brain damage you expect in an adults, children usually takes more time than that. They can sustain that damage. That's why period of more than 6 hours are recommended in children. Now, as per age, if the age of the child is at term till age of 2 months, means at birth till age of 2 months, we recommend 48 hours interval. If the age of the neonate is more than 2 months till age of 1 year, it is 24 hours. If the age is more than 1 year till age of 18 years, we recommend 12 hours. And more than 18 years, it is 6 hours. And this examination should be performed by a pediatrician. So this is the important criteria. Pediatrician should do both the assessments. Now, after doing assessment, documentation is a very important step. All phases of determination of brain death should be clearly mentioned in the medical record as follows. That is, first is etiology and irreversibility of coma or unresponsiveness. So that thing you have to mention. Second, that there is absence of motor response to pain. Third, there is absence of brainstem reflexes during during two separate examinations which have been performed by at least 6 hours in case of adult, and the intervals as per the children criteria. Then there is absence of respiration with the partial pressure of carbon dioxide more than or equal to 60 millimeters of mercury. And if you have performed ancillary test in that patient, you have to justify why you have performed, as well as mention the result of the test which you have performed. So again, I would repeat, in medical record, you have to document etiology and irreversibility of coma or unresponsiveness. We have to mention about the absence of motor response to pain, absence of brainstem reflexes during two separate examinations which have been performed at definite intervals. There is absence of respiration with PCO2 more than or equal to 60 millimeters of mercury, and justification for and the result of ancillary test if used. So we certify the brainstem death as per form number 10. So this certification is done by the team of board of medical experts, means those 4 members who are involved. So here, if you see here in the form, again it is mentioned that in charge of the hospital in which brainstem death has occurred, RMP nominated by the by the panel of names sent by hospitals or appropriate authority. We need a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, as well as the doctor who has been treating the diseased person. So these 4 people will certify this certificate, that is as per form number 10, which is used for certification of brainstem death. So here you may write the name of the deceased person, age, and son or wife or daughter of, and the address. After that, the date and the signature. Then here we fill all the details of the patient. Here we have to mention the hospital patient registration number, that is the IPD number. Here we have to write about the preconditions, whether the patient was having any illness or accident which led to irreversible brain damage, the time and date of the accident, and date and onset of irreversible coma. So you have to mention the date and the time very carefully. And then, as per the board of medical experts, you have to mention the date and time when the first medical examination was performed. Then you have to mention when the second medical examination was performed. At the same time, you have to certify that the following reversible causes of coma have been excluded, which includes intoxication due to alcohol, or drugs, relaxant, hypothermia, shock. All these things are to be checked. Then again, the coma, cessation of spontaneous breathing, all the brainstem reflexes which involve pupillary reflex, size, pupillary light reflex, doll's head eye movement, corneal reflexes on both eyes, motor response in any cranial nerve distribution. That is, we had seen the supraorbital pressure over here, then at the angle of the mandible. So then gag reflex, cuff reflex or tracheal reflex, then caloric testing. So where we look for eye movements, apnea test as specified, and where there any respiratory movements seen after performing apnea test. So all these things you have to mention in that certificate. So again, here you have to mention the time of first and second testing, and then you write the name of the person, and then is being declared brainstem dead. Then the date, and again they have to sign over here individually with the date and time. Okay. So this is how certification is there. Now let us see what are the ethical issues while declaring brain death. Now, ethically we follow the rule of dead donor rule, which says that it is wrong to kill a person to save life of another, which means that for retrieval of vital organs, the person should be already dead. Now, the DDR is neither a law or a regulation. It is just a description of an ethical norm. So, if you want to retrieve vital organs, especially for heart, we cannot take heart of a live person. For retrieval of heart, the person should be dead. If it is liver, yes, we can take it from a live person, but not from, heart cannot be taken from a live person. So, this thing has to be kept in mind. Now, when do you determine the withdrawal of cardiorespiratory support? It is a very, very important thing because it is quite a sensitive as well as an emotional situation. The withdrawal of the mechanical support should be in accordance with the hospital policies. And at this time, the doctor has to treat family with sensitivity and respect. And if the family wishes, they can witness disconnection of ventilator, means the moment when you are discontinuing the mechanical support, they can attend that scenario. But at the same time, they have to be counseled and prepared for possibly disturbing clinical activity. So first, they need to be counseled, sensitized, and then they can be a part of this witness. Now, brainstem death as per Indian law. Now, as per the Transplantation of Human Organ Act, the appropriate authority, who is the Director of Health Services, they register two set of hospitals. Now, first is the authorized transplant centers, means the place where transplantation is done in patients. So that, and second is a set of hospitals which are determined as non-transplant organ retrieval centers, that is NTORCs. So this is a separate set of hospitals where they have an operation theater and ICU. Now, what is this NTORC? So these are the hospitals which certify brain death and then conduct organ retrieval for therapeutic purposes. So these are the hospitals where the certification of brain death is done, but they are not permitted to perform actual transplantation. So NTORCs can only certify brain death and can do organ retrieval. They do not perform transplantation. And it is mandatory for all the NTORCs and the authorized transplant centers in the state to certify and notify the brain death cases to the Zonal Transplantation Coordination Committee. So without information of Zonal Transplantation Coordination Committee, no hospital can do organ retrieval, nor can do organ transplantation. So everything has to be done after notification to the Coordination Committee. Now, why this committee has come into picture? Because there is a need to streamline the procedure for cadaveric organ retrieval and transplantation, because we have to stop organ trafficking. Now, here the doctors who are involved in diagnosis of brain death are nowhere connected with the transplant surgeries concerning the brainstem death cadavers. Means the 4 members who have certified brain death should not be involved in the transplant surgeries. So that is what this rule says. Now, why these regulations are required? Because first thing is, this neurologic criteria-based determination of death facilitates end-of-life care and organ donation, because this involves lot of counseling, honest communication with the relatives. Second is, we have to protect the rights of patient as well as our healthcare professionals. Healthcare professionals are the people who are involved in determining brain death, organ retrieval, and organ transplantation. So we need to protect them legally. And third is, we have these rules enforce trust in governing healthcare in India. So if things go as per law, everybody would trust the doctors. Dignity in death, really is it required? Or we can just decide when and why? Can the doctor alone decide? No. Every time, whenever you have to declare the patient brain dead, the family members are a part of this. Now, why the question of death is important? Because whenever you resuscitate a patient, the doctors have to decide whether the patient is alive or dead. And second thing is organ donation. Organ donation is the primary indication to continue ventilation in this brain dead people. Now, in such patients, there is always a confusion regarding the time of death. Should you consider the cessation of cardiopulmonary functions or the time when the brainstem was declared? So this confusion is always there. Legally, the time when brainstem death is declared, that is the legal death as per Human Organ Transplantation of Human Organ Act. So when the second examination is performed and the doctor certifies that the patient is brainstem dead, that is the time of death legally. And that same time is also linked with the withdrawal of life support. And this confirmation of brain death is essential for organ donation. And simultaneously, the doctors who are involved in this whole process have to give end-of-life care. Now, why there is a need to declare the patient brain dead? Now, there could be many instances when the family refuses to accept that their patient is no more, and they would refuse discontinuation of ventilatory support and as well as refuse organ donation. Now, if there is continuation of ventilatory support, it would lead to unnecessary continuation of ICU stay that would increase the medical expenses, triage, as well as the doctors and the medical staff are also involved in maintaining this brain death patient. So to prevent this unnecessary expenditure of people's time and money, it is important to declare brain death. Now, after this thing, a declaration of brain death, it has created a new class of dead people that does not conform to society's expectations of normal death and dying, because legally they are dead, but still they are been continuing on ventilatory support. This is a great stress to family and friends. So the doctor should be involved in effective communication, should be involved in this care and support to family members, because unless and until you communicate and counsel the family members properly, you cannot go ahead with a request of organ donation in this potential donors. So before you make a request, you have to counsel the family members for it. And the only rationale, I repeat again, is to continue treatment after confirming brain death is organ donation. So if this patient is a potential organ donor, only then we have to continue the mechanical ventilators. So if the family members have refused, or if the patient is not fit for organ donation, you have to discontinue ventilation. And once the permission is obtained from the family members, the transplantation team takes over the further care. Now, after brain death, what are the events which occur in the patients? First and foremost thing is there is disruption of endocrine system, because as you know, there is cessation of cerebral blood flow. So all the organs start undergoing necrosis, ischemia necrosis. So there is disruption of hypothalamic pituitary adrenaline axis and thyroid dysfunction. Also, there is dysrhythmia due to electrolyte imbalance, acid-base status, there is hypothermia, decreased myocardial contractility. Now, this, as the hypothalamus is destroyed, these patients usually go into hypothermia. So if there is hypothermia, again, decrease in temperature leads to hypotension, decrease in myocardial contractility, and whenever the temperature falls, it can induce hemolysis or coagulopathy. So that is not good for those potential donors. And as the patient is already intubated, there is always a risk of ventilator-associated pneumonia and pulmonary edema. So what is the role of intensivist? First thing, it cannot be a one-man army. We need a team who are, from multiple disciplines. Means we need a pulmonologist, we would need a cardiologist, we would need intensivists. So many people are involved, and also endocrinologists. So all these people would be involved in maintaining this potential donor, because the physiology of the available organs in the donor should be normalized and maintained till the vital organs are retrieved from that body. So technically, we have to maintain the physiology of the body as it was before the death of the person, so that all the organ perfuse and there is no perfusion is maintained and there is no cellular damage within the organs. For that, there is a rule of 100, which is the target management for the organ donor. So let us see one by one. First thing, we have to maintain the systolic blood pressure more than or equal to 100 millimeters of mercury. The blood glucose should be more than or equal to 100 milligram%, because the cells require glucose for their metabolism. Hemoglobin concentration should be more than 100 grams per liter, which is equivalent to 10 grams per deciliter. Okay. Arterial PO2 should be more than 100 millimeters of mercury. And the fifth is urine output should also be equal to more than or equal to 100 ml per hour. So all these 100 should be maintained in that brain dead person, because we'll see how it is. So for this organ management, we have to first do hormonal resuscitation. All these 5 targets can be achieved by hormonal resuscitation, by maintaining a stable hemodynamic status, by maintaining evolumia and renal perfusion, and giving adequate pulmonary care. Now let us see the general rules. Now in general, we have to give intravenous fluid to maintain normal fluid volume, electrolyte balance, and normal acid-base balance, because all these are inevitable for, important for cell. Then we have to maintain temperature more than 35 degrees Celsius. The donor should be infection free, because we have to retrieve the organs. The infected organs can infect the the person who is going to receive the transplantation. So the donor should be infection free. And if there is a chance, you have discovered that there is a possibility of infection, you have to do the blood culture and all these things, determine which could be the species. And if you are planning to retrieve liver, kidney, you should be taking care that you are not giving hepatotoxic drugs or renal toxic drugs to the potential donor. And we have to continue enteral feeding in the potential donors. So all these are the generalized care you have to take while managing the organ donor. And how do we go for hormonal resuscitation? Now, first and most important thing is there is reduced ADH levels. So whenever there is reduced ADH, there would be polyuria, hypotension, hypovolemic, hypernatremia. Because of reduction in cholesterol and thyroxine, the basal metabolic rate is reduced, there is hypotension, there is decreased cardiac output, and there are chances of anaerobic metabolism, which can lead to accumulation of lactic acid. So which can again disturb the acid-base balance. So administration of thyroxine, steroids, vasopressin, insulin, they can improve the hemodynamic status as well as reduce the use of vasopressor drugs. When it is seen that when you administer these hormones, it improves the survival rate of the transplanted organs. So it is not just giving the organ. If we give the organ in a good quality, that would fulfill the job. Then how to maintain for hemodynamic status? Now the goal is to maintain the mean arterial pressure ranging between 60 to 80 millimeters of mercury. Systolic BP should be more than 100, heart rate more than 100, and urine output more than 100 ml per hour. So when you achieve all these things, this improves organ viability. Volume restoration can be done with the help of crystalloids and colloids. So the vasopressor drugs which we use to maintain the hemodynamic status are dopamine, noradrenaline. So all these two group of drugs, they counteract vasodilatory shock. So as we know, both of them are vasoconstrictors. Now E-volume and renal perfusion. Here, why you have to maintain this? Because we have to procure the kidney in a very good status. We have to see that renal failure is not started. So for that, we have to maintain the mean arterial pressure between 75 to 80. It seems that if the arterial pressure goes less than 70, there are chances of renal damage. So if you plan to procure kidney in the organ donor, you have to maintain MAP between 75 to 80 millimeters of mercury. Renal function is usually preserved with the help of diuretics and mannitol because they reduce the renal oxygen consumption by effect on sodium-potassium ATPase pump. So we support kidney with the use of loop diuretics and mannitol. Now pulmonary care. Here we have to see that there is adequate ventilation and there is no acute lung injury. Now the process of consent for organ and tissue donation. Now it is a very complex process because in India, even if the deceased person has already given his wish for organ donation, the next of kin means either their children, they have to formally give us the consent and sign the consent form. Without their formal consent and signatures, we cannot go ahead with organ donation in India. There is an organization that is National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization, that is NOTO. It is a computerized database who maintains the organ donor register. So what it does, it records the wishes of the people who have pledged for organ and tissue donation. So in case if I plan to go for organ donation, I can register myself in this NOTO so that after my death, if the NOTO is being notified, they will do the arrangements for my organ retrieval and whatever things are required. So NOTO is the organization who maintains the organ donor register. Now the role of next of kin. Now, as I told you that their consent and signature is required for organ retrieval in India. So if there is a case of dispute or if they differ in their opinion, they should be given ample time to discuss, settle and give final decision. And once they agree for organ retrieval in that donor, they have to fill Form 8, which records the status of consent by near relative or lawful possessor of the brain dead person. So they have to sign and fill that form number 8. Form number 10 is the death certification form. Form number 8 is the consent form by the near relative or lawful possessor of the brain dead person. So this is the form number 8, which is used for declaration cum consent to be filled by near relative or lawful possessor of brain stem dead person. So in Andhra Pradesh, there is Jeevan Dan or the cadaver transplantation. So in AP, the THO Act of 1995 is followed, which has authorized for cadaver transplantation. At the same time, after obtaining the consent of next of kin, it is also the responsibility of the hospital to inform the police about donation consent. And once the consent for organ donation is achieved, the cost for maintenance of cadaver, organ retrieval, organ transportation and preservation may be borne by the recipient or the institution or the government or non-governmental organization. The cost of maintaining the cadaver is not done by the donor family. So that is what the law says. So let us see what are the life-saving and the healing tissues or organs. Now, the list of organs is this side and list of tissues is this side. So heart. So heart transplantation provides years of active life. Lungs can help unaided breathing. Kidneys saves the patient from dialysis and early death. Liver, as you know, liver is a site of production of many proteins, and it is involved in many metabolic functions also. So it plays an important role in restoration of life. Intestines, which help in digestion and absorption. Pancreas, which help in eliminating insulin dependency. So all these organs help the patient in this way. Now cornea, it helps in restoration of sight. Tendons to rebuild joints. Valves, as you know, there are patients with valvular diseases. So retrieving of valves can help those cardiac defects. Veins to reestablish circulation. Skin donation can help in healing the burn patients, and bone can prevent the need of amputation. So this is how donation of various organs can help other people. So tissue procurement, it is a very complex process. Once the plan of transplantation is decided, only then the organs are retrieved. We cannot retrieve the organs and keep it for long time. And once the organs are retrieved, they have to be stored in a specific boxes, which will see that the organ does not undergo tissue injury. So if you see here, this is how the heart is maintained in this tissue procurement aid. This is kidney and this is lung. So this is how you maintain, you preserve the tissue after the organ is being retrieved from the body. So you have to maintain the organ, preservation till this organ is being transplanted in other patient. So what are the time frames between recovery and transplantation? So kidneys, the time ranges from 24 to 48 hours. Lungs is 4 to 6 hours. Heart is 4 to 6 hours. Liver, 12 to 16 hours. Intestine, again 4 to 6. Cornea, 4 to 48 hours. And tissues, they can be recovered and stored until needed. So if you see, the shelf life of heart, lungs and intestine is very less. Whereas kidney, it has got kidney and cornea almost 48 hours. So once the organ is retrieved, within 4 to 6 hours, at least heart, lung and intestine have to be transplanted. So this is like a race against time. So we have something known as green corridor. Now green corridor is nothing but it is a special route where all the traffic signals in the route from the organ harvest, means the hospital from which the organ retrieval was done to the hospital where the transplantation is going to be done, that route, all the traffic signals are green, no red signals. So all the traffic signals are green so that we can escape from traffic congestion, and all the traffic signals are controlled manually. So why this is needed? Because it is a race against time. As I mentioned, the time duration between the recovery and the transplant for tissues like heart, liver, lung, and intestine is only 4 to 6 hours. So once the organ is retrieved, within that much time, we have to transplant. So for that job, we require strong coordination between hospitals, local police, traffic police, airport staff. So this is a hospital from where the organ is retrieved, and with the help of the traffic and the local police, the route is cleared, all the traffic signals are made green. If needed, we can also take help of airport staff. This green corridor ensures that there is no organ wastage after the retrieval. Means after retrieval, the organ is transplanted in a viable status in that patient. So this is an example. The first city where the green corridor was done was in Chennai in 2014, where the retrieved heart arrived in 14 minutes, covering 12 kilometers from a government general hospital to Fortis Hospital to save the life of 21-year-old man. So after that, there have been many instances where the green corridor was followed, and even the help of airport staff was taken for to ensuring the shortest and the fastest way to transport the organ. Now, there was a movie, Traffic, made in 2011, which depicts about a scenario where a retrieved heart is to be, should be reached to the hospital within 4 hours. So this is a movie. So to summarize, the diagnosis of brain death, then referral to the team of medical boards where they will see, assess, then they diagnose. We have to discuss with the family, again do medical evaluation, do the surgical retrieval, preservation and transport, and then the transplantation. So this is a very tedious job. Now, it is said that one donor can save up to 8 lives through organs donated, whereas via tissue donation, it can heal up to 75 lives. So, one potential donor can make such a big difference, saving life of 8 lives and healing up to 75 lives. That's why I say, even after a straight line, it can give life to many. That's why you can recycle yourself and be a potential organ donor. Why I'm insisting? Because as per situation, in past 4 years, there has been only 3-fold increase in the number of donors. And why we need many donors? Because almost 4 lakh people are dying every year waiting for a transplant. So that much critical is the situation and the need for organs. So the implications are, we have to educate our doctors towards their attitude and perception of brain death. Means first thing is, they should have adequate knowledge and they should be motivated to motivate other people. At the same time, they should be properly trained in diagnosing, interpretation and documentation of the medical records which are required for determining brain death. At the same time, our doctors should be adequately trained in breaking the bad news. And broaching means you have to raise and discuss the issue of organ donation with the family members. So we have to deal with this issue also, because organ retrieval is, organ retrieval is a need of ours, because there are many patients who are waiting for organs. So organ retrieval and transplantation is a race against time. So we need a strong coordination between the hospitals, the traffic police, local police, and the airport staff. Let organ donation, it should not be a struggle for many people. Be an organ donor and light up someone's world. These are the references which I have taken, from which I have made my lecture. Thank you very much for your patient listening.